Everyone's been to a grocery store. They've bought food, they've eaten it. Well, according to Center for Food Safety, currently 85% of U.S. corn is genetically engineered, as are 91% of soybeans, 88% of cotton. And this is important because cottonseed oil is often used in food products. It has been estimated that upwards of 70% of processed foods on supermarket shelves, from soda to soup, crackers to condiments, contain genetically engineered ingredients. This leads me to my main point, which is genetically modified foods present a danger to our society. I'm going to talk about the combination of genetically modified crops designated for animal consumption, increased creation of drug-resistant viruses and bacteria, the genetic modification of crops to resist pesticides, and that genetically modified foods cause mutations or new breeds of drug-resistant weeds and insects. The combination of genetically modified crops designated for animal consumption can sometimes be mixed into produce meant for human consumption. This leads to a high possibility for causing health problems. According to an article written by Nell Boyce, in 2000 there was an incident where traces of Starlink was found in products meant for human consumption. This is a problem because Starlink is a genetically modified corn crop, which was restricted to only feed for animals. The restriction was regulated by the FDA, which regulates whether or not genetically modified produce are safe for human consumption. The next point is that increased creation of drug-resistant viruses, the genetically modified crops create an increased creation of drug-resistant viruses and bacteria. This is because most genetically modified foods are modified using the DNA of viruses and bacteria, and this is because according to GeneWatch UK, they say that genes used to modify may come from any other organism, but in commercial crops, bacteria are usually the most common source for the modification of GM crops. My next point is that genetic modification of crops to resist pesticides unintentionally harms the wildlife in the area. An example is the skylark, which is a native bird to Britain, is unintentionally harmed by the genetic modification of crops. The crops resist the pesticides which are sprayed onto them, which intentionally kills the weeds in the area. These weeds are an essential food source to the skylark population, and according to Furbank, in an article in a journal, scientists estimate that 80% of the skylark population will have to find new means of finding food. Another example of genetic modification of crops unintentionally harming the wildlife in the area is that, according to the Biotechnology Australia website, tests in the U.S. showed that 44% of caterpillars of the monarch butterfly died when fed large amounts of pollen from genetically modified corn. My last point is that genetically modified foods cause mutations or new breeds of drug-resistant weeds and insects. According to the New York Times, the American farmers' almost reliant use of the pesticide Roundup has led to the rapid growth of stubborn new superweeds. And according to Ian Heath, the director of International Survey of Herbicide-Resistant Weeds, which is financed by the agricultural chemical industry, they estimate that a total amount of United States farmland affected by the Roundup-resistant weeds is 7 million to 10 million acres. But in reality, there are roughly 170 million acres planted with corn, soybeans, and cotton that are affected with the Roundup-resistant weeds. These weeds are also found in Australia, China, and Brazil. I hope that you agree with me that genetically modified foods present a danger to our society, because genetically modified foods genetically modified foods combined with foods with human consumption can cause health problems, and genetically modified foods present a danger to the environment.
All right, well, the proposition is clearly stated, so that part's fine. I like the opening with some statistics to show how significant this issue could potentially be. The secondary points are laid out, but only one of them is phrased as a claim. All the others just sound like data, and there are an awful lot of them, which is strange because at the end of the argument, it sounds like you basically have two supporting claims, one that it is harmful to health and one that it is harmful to the environment, and I think that that would be a simpler way to be structuring this. And then it seems like you have several secondary or minor claims on the environment and a couple things on health, and I think that's the way it ought to be structured. That was problematic in the body of the speech also because you start rushing into those supporting points, and they have a tendency to run together without being distinguished. There's not any numerical signpost on them. The transitions between those points are very quick, and sometimes it just seems like you're dumping the data on us, so you want to be careful about that. A couple of times you did offer some explanations about how processes work, and I thought that that was pretty effective. You had a good example to start with that 2000 example, but is that the same name for the product that they have for the birds that are disappearing in England, or was it Starlink or Starlark? You know, there was a little bit of overlap there. That was mildly confusing, not a lot confusing. The only statistical data that you had, right at the beginning you had some information, then there was some information about those birds having to look for another food source, and then right at the end you also had some information about the amount of acreage that might be involved. I thought that was that last one also helped in that particular category on the statistical information. Generally good citation of the testimony. It was a little bit confusing, though, on one of the actually two of the inferences. On one inference, we've got there aren't going to be any weeds, and these birds are all going to die because they're going to starve. On the other one, we've got weeds that can't disappear because they're super resistant. So it seems almost like you've got two contrary positions that you're taking on this argument, and you would need to explain that. You do have a little bit more time to explain those things. It felt a little bit like you were rushing there during the speech, as opposed to